if the Supreme Court rules in your favor later this year on the immigration plan, how long would it take the White House to execute that plan to shield these people from deportation? And is there a plan in place to front load that in the few remaining months that you'll have before this administration comes to an end?
Mm-hmm. Josh, I want to be careful about being respectful to the Supreme Court. Obviously they're going to hear the arguments on both sides. We've got a lot of confidence in the legal arguments that we'll be making before the court. The kinds of executive actions that the president took a little over a year ago now to try to bring some much needed reforms and a greater accountability to our broken immigration system were clearly consistent with the precedent that was established by other presidents and clearly within the confines of his authority as President of the United States. That is certainly that's the nature of the argument that will be presented to the court. And it should be noted that there's one state, Texas, is sort of leading the charge against these executive actions before the Supreme Court. But I'll note that there are 15 other states and the District of Columbia that have filed paperwork indicating they strongly support the implementation of these executive actions. And there are actually law enforcement officials inside the state of Texas that are hoping, and have, again, communicated this to the court as well, that are hoping that these executive actions will be able to go into force because it will make their communities inside the state of Texas safer. So we've got a strong argument to make, both in terms of the legal ground on which we're operating, but also in terms of the practical impact, positive impact, that these executive actions will have on the security of communities all across the country, a positive impact on our economy, and obviously a positive impact on thousands of families inside the United States.
And given that all of the Republican candidates are saying that they would tear this up as they came into office, are you comfortable, if this goes your way and you have a chance to execute this, asking these immigrants who are illegally to come out of the shadows and identify themselves? I mean, aren't you asking them to really put themselves out on a limb, considering what could come next?
Yeah. Well, Josh, this was an argument that was made by some in advance of the president's, the administration's decision to implement DACA. This is essentially that would allow dreamers, those individuals who entered the United States as young children, and giving them a status has given them the ability to try to live out the kind of life that's in the best interest of the country. The president announced these executive actions in an election year in 2012, and there were some who suggested that there might not be a significant number of people who would sign up for this program because it could be reversed by a president who succeeded Barack Obama. And we've actually seen a pretty strong take-up rate when it comes to these DREAM Act protections that are extended, like I said, to individuals who entered the United States as children, essentially through no fault of their own. And so, again, it's hard to apply one case to the other, but the recent evidence that we can point to, would indicate that there are a lot of people who would benefit from this decision, who would take advantage of the benefits as soon as they possibly could. And the good news is that the benefits are not just going to be enjoyed by individuals who qualify, but also would be enjoyed by the broader country and by our economy. Like I said, there are law enforcement officials across the country who believe that the successful implementation of these executive actions would make their community safer because it would focus law enforcement resources on felons and others who posed a threat to the community and not on separating families. And there's been some academic work that's been done by the president's economic advisors that indicate the broader economic benefit for the country is pretty significant when you take a look at the impact it would have on economic growth over the course of 10 years.
So if a Republican wins the White House, how will you ensure that the immigration action, should you be successful in the Supreme Court case, isn't turned off on January 21st? Is there like some way to secure the longevity of that?
I think the most effective way for us to secure the longevity of these reforms is to actually have Congress pass legislation that would enact them. And there's strong support for that across the country, but strong opposition to that in the House Republican Conference. That's unfortunate. But look, that is the difference. This is why, or this is at least one of the important reasons, why we've often made the case that the president taking executive action does not absolve Congress of their responsibility to pass legislation. And this is one reason why, that executive actions can be, in most cases, reversed by subsequent presidents. Legislation that's passed is more enduring and requires another act of Congress in most cases to change it. So that's why we're going to continue to press Congress to take these important steps. But what the president said in November of 2014 when he announced these actions is that he was only taking these actions and taking these steps because Congress had failed to act, that he would continue to push Congress to act even though he was taking these steps. And he also noted that if Congress were to pass legislation, that he was happy to have congressional legislation supersede the executive actions that he had taken. So this ultimately is a reflection of a president who's determined to do everything he possibly can to try to fix our broken immigration system. But ultimately, we need to see Congress take some steps.
I want to try to re-ask Josh's question about the immigration ruling, about how quickly you can actually get this work permits and get people out of the shadows if this ruling is in your favor. Is this something that can be done before the next election? Is the infrastructure already in place to start issuing these work permits and getting this program up and running, given the fact that the president only has a year left in office?
Well, listen, Tolu, I want to be deferential of the Supreme Court. They have a role to play here, and so I certainly want to be respectful of that role. The administration believes strongly that the prompt implementation of these executive actions would have positive benefits for our economy, would have positive benefits for the security of communities across the country. So we're certainly interested in moving forward with implementing these executive actions as expeditiously as possible. But the Supreme Court has a role to play here, and we're going to make a presentation to the Supreme Court about why we should be allowed to do that. And at this point, I'm just not in a position to provide you a lot of guidance about what would happen in the event of a positive outcome at the Supreme Court. But we certainly have a lot of confidence in our arguments. But ultimately, we'll have to see how those arguments play out before I can give you a lot of detail about our ability to move forward.
The Supreme Court is asking attorneys on both sides in the immigration case to argue a point about whether the president is violating his constitutional duty to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Our Supreme Court reporter says it's rather unprecedented that this question is being litigated in the context of an executive power fight. Is the White House worried that the court might rebuke the administration's aggressive use of executive actions, or are you worried about anything else this question portends?
Well, Byron, I think what the case that we will make is that that these kinds of decisions about enforcement are well within the authority of the executive branch. After all, these kinds of enforcement decisions were also made by President Reagan and President George H.W. Bush in the context of the Family Fairness Program. This is essentially a program that provided a temporary relief and work authorization for up to 1.5 million people. So this is the way that the authority was exercised by Presidents Reagan and the first President Bush, and it's entirely consistent with the way that President Obama has exercised his administration's authority in this matter. That is the case that we've been making since the day that we announced these executive actions. There probably is a more technical legal argument that will be presented before the court, and I'll give our attorneys the opportunity to make that argument. But just as a matter of common sense and by consulting recent presidential history, we feel confident that there is a strong precedent that exists for this executive action.
Can you give us the general philosophy behind the president's approach to immigration? On one hand, you have the administration offering deportation relief, that's at the center of the controversy that's in front of the court. On the other hand, you've moved pretty aggressively to deport some Central Americans who were here. I mean, I get that these are different groups and there are different circumstances, but what's the overall coherence or approach to the administration's philosophy about who gets to stay and who has to go?
Well, there are a couple different ways to answer that question. I know it gets repetitive, but it bears repeating. If we really want to solve the challenges of what is so obviously a broken immigration system, we need congressional legislation. That's the most impactful, comprehensive way for us to do the common sense thing. And that's why the president has pushed so hard for Congress to take that action. And it continues to be a source of disappointment that House Republicans blocked a common sense proposal to do that. So separate from the question about legislation, our approach has been to use as much of the president's authority consistent with the law to try to fix as many of the problems in that system as we can. And one thing that one fact about the system is that because our system is broken, there are potentially millions of people inside the United States who have been in the country for years and are otherwise making a positive contribution to their community. And they send their kids to school alongside American children. They attend religious services alongside other Americans. They work in factories and other facilities alongside other Americans. These are, in many cases, upstanding members of communities all across the country. And those are the individuals whose cases we believe need to be resolved consistent with our interests as a nation. And the president does not believe that it's in our interest, nor is it consistent with our values, to go and tear those families apart. What he actually does believe is in our national interest is that we need to bring some greater accountability to our broken immigration system and allow them to come out of the shadows and allow them to be in a situation where they are paying taxes, where they are undergoing a background check, where they are learning English. That's the nature of the president's actions. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And there are significant public safety, national security, and economic benefits associated with this action. We have always said that we need to do more to secure the border. That's why the legislation that was defeated or blocked by House Republicans included an historic investment in border security. It's also why we have said that people who've only recently crossed the border wouldn't be prioritized or eligible for this kind of relief. And we certainly don't want to set up a system that provides an incentive for individuals to flee violence in other countries and take a dangerous journey in their own right to try to come to the United States. And that's why we've worked with the United Nations to establish this separate process that would allow individuals in Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras to petition the U.S. government, consistent with a routinized process, to get some humanitarian relief. And they can do that without putting themselves in the hands of a human trafficker or otherwise taking a journey that has victimized too many innocent people.
You've had the head of a prominent immigration rights group call the president the deporter-in-chief. On the other hand, you have Republicans saying the president's handing out amnesty, wants amnesty. I mean, these are rather different interpretations for actions by this administration. I mean, what do you think the president's legacy on this issue will be, and how would you sum it up?
Well, I think ultimately it'll be historians who have the opportunity to do that. I think historians will note that Republicans blocked a common sense compromise proposal that this administration helped to craft in the United States Senate. And I think ultimately, a lot of historians will say that despite making this a top priority, the president was not able to do as much as he would have liked to have done to fix our broken immigration system. And one of the things that we certainly want to do is, in the face of congressional inaction, try to lay out a path to solve at least some of these problems And our proposed solution is one that we're going to aggressively defend before the courts.